Okay, so we're looking at equivalent fractions, and this is one of the more important topics that we do, and particularly with your understanding, so it's important that you understand this. Just have a look at the key ideas. Equivalent fractions are fractions that mark the same place on a number line. For example, 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent fractions. Okay, if you have 1/2 of something, it means a pizza, for example. If you have half a pizza and it's cut into 2 pieces, okay, your denominator tells you how many bits your object or your item is cut into. All right, and the numerator tells you how many of those bits that you own. Okay, so in this case, if we've got a pizza, all right, and it's cut into 2 slices, all right, and you own 1/2, you have half the pizza. Okay, now with 2/4, all they've done is they've cut this pizza this way as well. So now there's 4 pieces. You own 2 pieces, so you still own half the pizza. Okay, even though the denominator changes, the numerator is still 1/2 of that denominator. Equivalent fractions are produced by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number. This number can be any whole number greater than 1. Equivalent fractions can also be produced by dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same number. Simplifying fractions. This stuff here is very important. Simplifying fractions involves writing a fraction in its simplest form, or easiest form, or most convenient form. To do this, the numerator and the denominator must be divided by their highest common factor. Alright, we worked a lot on factors in our last chapter. This section here, simplifying fractions, this is what you need to know, because when you are doing a test or any work with fractions at all, it is expected that when you give your answer, you simplify your fractions. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of the questions here. Question 6. Just have a look at 6a. Write 4 equivalent fractions for each of the fractions listed. So for A, we've got 1/2. All right. In my book, I'm just going to write here 1/2. Okay. Now I need 4 equivalent fractions for this. Is it 4? Yes, it is 4. Okay. All I'm going to do to start off with, I'm going to multiply my numerator and my denominator by a whole number. Okay. The easiest whole number that I can think of is 1. But if I multiply them by 1, nothing happens. So I'm going to multiply them by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. And 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, and all of a sudden I've got an equivalent fraction. Now I could do the same here. I could go 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 4 is 8, except I'm going to come back to my original fraction. And I'm going to multiply it by 3 now. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 times 2 is 6. Okay? Once again, I could do the same thing here. I could multiply this fraction, but I'm going to come back to my original fraction. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 4 is 8. So that gives me 3 equivalent fractions. I need one more. So once again, I'll come back here, multiply 1 by 5, and multiply 2 by 10. Alright? And there are my 4 equivalent fractions. Alright, pretty simple stuff. Let's have a look at question 9. Question 9, it asks us to simplify. Write the following fractions in their simplest form. Okay, so for A, we've got 15 over 20. Now we need to find the highest common factor of these two numbers, or we need to find any factor at all. Okay? If you find the highest common factor, you'll only have to simplify once. If you find a factor that is lower than its highest common factor, you'll have to simplify more than once. So for example, with this one, because 15 ends in a 5 and 20 ends in a 0, I know that they're both divisible by 5. So if I divide 15 by 3, 15 by 5, I get 3. And if I divide 20 by 5, I get 4. Now this fraction here is in its simplest form now, okay, 3/4. Right, they're both the same fractions, but it's in its simplest form. Let's have a look at another one in question 9. Let's go D, 8 over 22. Straight away, I can tell that this fraction can be divided by 2. They're both even numbers. Even numbers can always be divided by 2. So I'm going to do that straight away. Okay, so 2 goes into 8 4 times. All right, and 2 goes into 2 goes into 22 11 times. Okay, you'll notice here that 11 is a prime number. That means our fraction is simplified. We can't go any further. I'm going to do one more. Let's have a look at 9G. Okay, once again, okay, a lot of you will look at these two numbers and say they're both even. Let's divide it by 2. Okay, which is fine. You can definitely divide it by 2. So 2 goes into 8 4 times. Okay, and 2 goes into 56 28 times. I have to think about that one for a moment. Okay, but obviously here's a situation which I was referring to before. This fraction is not simplified as much as it can be. Okay, because we divided it by 2, we didn't divide it by its highest common factor. Alright, so now we're in a situation where we have to simplify again. Alright, which is okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter how you get to your simplest form. All that matters is that you get to your simplest form. It's obviously easier though if you can do it by finding the highest common factor first. Once again, 2 even numbers, so hey, why don't we divide by 2 again? So 2 goes into 4 twice, and then it goes into 28 14 times. Alright. Now, is this our simplest form? Well, they're both even numbers, so I doubt it. Okay. So once again, we can divide by 2 again. So 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. Alright, now that is our simplest form because there's 2 prime numbers there, and we know that we can't divide any further. If we go back to the very beginning, okay, this one here, and if we look for a higher common factor, we don't have to look very far because our numerator is actually the highest common factor, 8. 56 is divisible by 8, okay? And if we were to divide 8 by 8, we would get 1. And if we were to divide 56 by 8, we would get 7. All right, so in one operation, we got back to our simplest form. So it's always more effective to divide by your highest common factor, if you can. But if you can't think of those, all right, you still have other options. It just takes you longer to get there. Going to look at one more. Problem solving question. A family block of chocolate consists of 12 rows of 6 individual squares. Tanya eats 16 individual squares. What fraction of the block, in simplest terms, has Tanya eaten? Okay, so the block itself, that's the first thing we probably need to work out, is 12 times 6. Okay, so in our book we can write 12 times 6, which equals 72. So that becomes our denominator. All right, now Tanya has eaten 16 of those squares. All right, so that's obviously going to be our numerator. Once again, now we need to simplify. Okay, few ways we can find the highest common factor. Okay, absolutely we could find the highest common factor, or we could just take a bit of a shortcut and divide by the numbers that we're most familiar with. So in this instance, we know that we can divide both of these by 2. So 16 divided by 2 is obviously 8. And 72 divided by 2 is 36. Okay, but we're not at our simplest form yet. All right. Both of these numbers, okay, that I'm looking at here, I know that they can both be divided by 4. All right, so rather than dividing by 2 again, we're going to divide by 4 this time. 4 goes into 8 twice, and 4 goes into 36 9 times. All right, so that fraction, is there a number that we can divide 2 by and 9 by? Well, there's one, but there's no other numbers. So our answer to that question is 2/9, okay, after we've simplified.